Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming out. Today, our program is Music Therapy and Aging, and we're very lucky to have with us Chrissy Pearson from the Baycrest Center. Chrissy has a Bachelor of Music Therapy, is a registered psychotherapist, and a Fellow of the Association of Music and Imagery. She received a Bachelor's of Music Therapy from the University of Windsor in 2002, interned at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center in Aging and Veteran Care, and has worked in various settings including long-term care, palliative care, acute care, adult group homes, and schools. And in addition to practicing traditional music therapy, Chrissy is a Fellow of the Association of Music and Imagery and practices guided imagery and music as well, and currently works at Baycrest as well as the Music Therapy Center. So it should be quite a fascinating program, and here's Chrissy Pearson.
Thank you so much, Greg, and thanks for having me here. I don't know if you can see me over this. I'm not very tall, but I am back here. And we're getting beep, beep, beep. Here we go. I'll just use the keypad. So I'm here to talk to you today about music therapy, and specifically music therapy and aging. Here's a little bit of an overview. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm even interested in this field and how I came to the field. I'll give you a short explanation about what exactly music therapy is. I'm going to talk about music therapy and dementia, as well as music therapy for caregivers, and also music therapy for what I'll call normal aging, in quotations. I'm not sure there is such a thing as normal aging, but focusing in those three areas. And we'll talk a little bit about some case examples I'll share with you from clients that I've worked with to give you some examples. And finally, we'll maybe talk a little bit, if we have time, about how you can use music in your day-to-day life just to simply be more well, no matter what stage in the aging process you're in. So I'll tell you a little bit about my interest. I had a very musical childhood. My mother forced me to start piano lessons when I was very young, and I hated playing the piano, and she insisted that this was a good skill for me to learn. And when I entered the 6th grade in elementary school, I was fortunate to be in a school that had a music program, and I chose to play the flute. And I loved playing the flute, and I went home and begged my mother, please, can I stop with piano lessons and take flute lessons? And fortunately, they said yes, that would be all right with them. And I started playing the flute and practicing the flute with an independent teacher and in school, and played in all the bands and did all of those musical things that I was able to do throughout high school. And at the same time, my grandparents were all aging, and 2 of my grandparents developed different kinds of dementia. And without knowing anything about music therapy, I, especially with my grandfather, would go to his long-term care home and play music with him. And sometimes some of the other residents would come and we'd sing together. It didn't occur to me at the time that was something even interesting. It was just something that I was doing. And as it got time for me to graduate high school, I was thinking about what am I going to do and what do I want to study. I was interested in clinical psychology and thought, okay, I'm going to go to university and study psychology, or maybe I'll study social work. I wanted to work with people. And my mom, who was a guidance counselor, came to me and said, look at this really neat program. It's called music therapy. And it sort of beautifully blended my love of music with my desire to help people. And that's sort of what got me to that place. In terms of the other thing that really made this click for me was just my own sort of life philosophy that no matter who we are, no matter what our challenges are, what our abilities are, if we're living independently or needing support, that we all have a right to live in a way that I would call well. We deserve to live well. We deserve to have the resources that can help us to live well. And I really believe music therapy as a profession is something that can help people to achieve that. And being well is defined differently depending on who we are. And as we go through today's presentation, you may see yourself in the presentation or other people from your family that you love and care for, and how you feel about wellness might be different than the next person. So I encourage you to sort of keep your own values in mind and your own philosophy around what it means to be well as we go through the process of aging. What's the saying? It's not how long we live, it's how well we live. And that's sort of the philosophy that guides me. So we'll talk a bit about music therapy. What is it? To become a music therapist, some people are always surprised when I say to them, I have a Bachelor of Music Therapy. There's a degree that you take to become a music therapist. The degree involves being part of the music department, part of the psychology department, and part of a music therapy department. So it's 3 areas that you study. Lots of practicum experience because we are trained to work with lots of different kinds of people. So not just people who are aging or have challenges related to aging. We work with many different kinds of people, and our education prepares us for that. After we graduate, we do a 1,000-hour supervised internship that is within an area that really interests us, and followed by a certification process. So once we've received the certification, we can confidently say that we're ready to practice music therapy. In Canada, there's 5 schools only that offer the training program. If you're interested in the training program, you can email me and I can send you lots of information about that. So the Canadian Association for Music Therapy, that's our national governing body. They're the ones who set out all the expectations for education. They set out our code of ethics, our standards of practice. They oversee all the certification. They make sure that our membership is up to date and that we've been continuing our education so that their members are professionally competent across the country and practicing appropriately. And areas and scope of practice, I'm not going to talk a lot about this because I could talk about it for hours. Essentially, anyone who could use anyone who could use therapy could work with a music therapist. So whether it's a teenager in a youth program who's suffering with depression, or a person in long-term care who has dementia, a child in palliative care who's dying of cancer, no matter who you are or what you're trying to cope with, probably a music therapist could help you work towards some of the goals that you're trying to achieve. The goals could be behavioral in nature. So, for example, trying to stop a difficult behavior for someone who's in the later stages of dementia. It could be social in nature. So for children with autism, helping them to be able to integrate and interact with each other. It could be psychosocial in nature, so people who have maybe had trauma in their lives and working through those traumas and helping them to understand them and work through them in an easier way. The goals could be about communication, so very physical goals of regaining speech and the ability to speak. Could be self-expression. There are sometimes musical goals as well. Sometimes we work with people who are coming to us to actually work on something that is musical in their life. But generally, it's not really about the music at all. It's about what we're trying to achieve with the music. And that's something that some people struggle with. They think they have to be musical to benefit from music therapy, and it's actually the opposite. I find the people who are, let's say, less professionally musical are often more open to participating in music therapy. So no experience required to benefit. So what does music therapy look like? Again, it looks different depending on who you're working with. Obviously, working with a street youth looks completely different than working with someone who's dying in palliative care. And what we are trained to do is to use music and to use musical elements in a way that meets the person's needs. So today we're going to be focusing on aging. We're going to talk a bit about dementia. We're going to talk about music in the brain. What I'd like you to take away from this as well is that music therapy really spans all ages, all abilities, all different challenges that you might face in life. And if you want more information about music therapy with different kinds of people, that's something, I do have a handout if you want more information that you can take with you before you go. And certainly you can look some things up or contact me, and I'd be happy to tell you more about the different kinds of people we work with and what that would look like. Okay. Oh, the one thing I forgot to mention, when we're talking about what music therapy looks like, I often have people who are musicians or entertainers who say, oh yes, I do music therapy. And so I always like to explain the difference between music entertainment and music therapy. Entertainment, I'm going to say most of the time, is very therapeutic. And the therapeutic value in going to a concert, or the therapeutic value in having someone sing for you or being part of a choir, all of those things are very therapeutic. What makes music therapy different is just the therapist, that you're working with someone towards specific goals, you're working with them continuously to help progress through some goals or to help achieve a sort of level of wellness that you're not able to achieve without it. And that sort of defines the entertainer from the therapist. But I always tell the entertainers, you're not wrong, you're just not a therapist. So yes, what you're doing is absolutely valuable and probably therapeutic for many of the people who are coming to listen to your music and to interact with your music, maybe dance and move to your music. That can be a beautiful therapeutic thing. And music therapy is what we're going to talk about today, which takes it to a different level. So music in the brain is something that is being talked about in the media all the time right now. I'm very, very sure that most of you have heard about some of the interesting stories. What comes to mind right now is Gabby Giffords in the US when she was shot. Part of her recovery was working with a music therapist to regain her ability to speak. Stories like that are everywhere right now and getting lots of attention, which is really exciting for music therapists because it's been a long time of trying to educate people about how this all works. And as we age, no matter what challenges we face, our brains are going to change. That's just what happens. From the time that our brains are developing to the time that we leave this earth, our brains are constantly changing. And as we age, the changing starts to happen faster and in different ways. And sometimes that involves additional challenges, whether it's a memory loss or physical ability that we lose. All of those things are going to happen no matter how deep the challenge. We're probably going to encounter something. And now that we have all of this research that talks about the brain, we really understand why music therapy is so effective. And we can thank MRI machines and all the other scanning machines out there that look at what's happening when not only when we listen to music, but when we participate in music and when we're working with a music therapist. So it's neat. They can see the difference between putting a CD on and listening to the music versus singing along to the music or moving our bodies to the music versus sitting with a music therapist and working through something musically. The scans all look different, but what does look the same is that music is everywhere in our brain. That used to be that researchers, scientists thought that music had a place in our brain, much like speech has a place, much like movement or memories or emotions. A lot of things have specific areas of the brain, and if that area gets damaged, then that skill gets damaged or that ability is damaged. What makes music so effective is that it is literally everywhere in our brain. So when we're listening to music, lots of different areas light up. When we're participating in music, even more areas of the brain light up. And that's why, especially as we age and have challenges with memory or have challenges with speech or have challenges with movement or physical abilities, music can often be helpful. There's 4 areas up there that I've connected to the brain. You can see rewiring. I'll talk a little bit about that because I find it to be really fascinating. Memories, cognition and movement, and pleasure's there at the bottom. Pleasure is a really important one. If we're not enjoying the music that we're listening to, different areas of the brain light up that say, I don't really relate to that. So one thing to remember is that enjoying the music whether you're listening to it or working with a music therapist, you have to have that pleasure principle for it to be really effective. Okay, so let me look at a few of these areas of the brain. Now that we know sort of how effective it is, I really think it's kind of the simplest and most complex thing that we could talk about is how music impacts the brain. When one part of the brain is damaged, so for example, we have a stroke or we get dementia, we start to lose our long-term memories, our short-term memories, music has the ability to sort of rewire the brain. So if I've had a stroke and I can no longer speak, but I'm looking at you and I want to say something, I cognitively know what I want to say, but I don't have the ability to actually say the words, we can often sing before we can speak. And I've worked with many people through different music therapy techniques. Singing always comes first, and it's really fascinating to see that progression. And now we know what's happening is that, the pathway that's not working anymore, the pathway that's cut off or blocked or damaged, is not needed because music can help create a new pathway. So once the singing develops and making musical sounds develops, that can transfer into speaking the sounds. And that's kind of the simplest way to explain it. We could go through lots of scientific papers about how that works. I'll just tell you from experience, it's fascinating to see, and it really does work. The same is true when we look at memory and things like dementia or other brain injuries that maybe affect our memory. The last thing that we lose in terms of memories are musical memories. Music sticks around, probably now, we know, because it's involved in so many different parts of the brain. So often someone who's in the late stages of dementia can no longer recognize their spouse's face or can no longer get up and feed themselves. When I go to see them, and if I know that they are a really big Frank Sinatra fan, if I can pick a song or run through a series of songs, chances are something will catch their attention and things in the brain start to line up and go, that's familiar, and maybe they open their eyes and they look at me, or maybe they look around the room and smile at people, maybe they even start singing. So we know now the reason that this is happening is that the brain is experiencing the music in many, many more ways than it experiences one skill or one thing that we're trying to do. Okay. To make sure we stay on time here so that I get through all of this. I love talking about it, so I can take up too much time. We're going to start by looking at music therapy and dementia, and then we'll talk about caregivers and people who are not experiencing challenges and how music therapy works and how it can be helpful. So when we're working with a music therapist, we are doing consistent work. We're working on goals that are tailored to the individual or tailored to a group. The therapist is going to develop a treatment plan and make goals that they can track. So it really is something that we want to, as therapists, we want to see that what we're doing is working. We can only do that if we have a plan and if we're writing our observations and tracking things, trying different things to see if something might work better. All of that is really important. That's also what kind of sets us differently from entertainment. We really are looking for results and how we can better achieve those results. So I wrote down a couple of examples of some goals that I might work on with someone who has dementia, keeping in mind that it's tailored to the individual. So if depression isn't an issue, then that's not a goal to help them with that. But for a lot of the people I've encountered, depression and anxiety are often really prevalent when you're experiencing those kinds of challenges. Self-expression and communication can be a challenge. That's something we might work on. Helping someone to have meaningful interaction. Again, when we lose the ability to connect with people, music can often help to facilitate that. Reminiscence, and also maintaining memory. So as things start to deteriorate, sometimes through music therapy, we can extend that ability to remember, whether it's a short amount of time or a longer amount of time. Any amount of time is good if you're starting to lose those skills. And also decreasing difficult behavior. A lot of the time as we're aging and if our minds are not functioning the way they once were, and we get confused or we get agitated or we don't know where we're going, we can have behaviors that are really difficult, whether it's constantly wandering or becoming aggressive or behaving inappropriately with other people. Music therapists often work to help decrease those behaviors and to help the staff or the caregivers to understand how they could use music to help decrease those behaviors. So those are some examples of what a music therapist might look at. At any stage through the process of living with dementia, we can also help to facilitate whatever musical identity that person had. So the reason I mention that is if you were a concert pianist, that identity is probably really important to you. And so a music therapist can sometimes work also to really help maintain and to preserve the person's musical identity, which may be more important for those who perhaps made a career out of music than someone who is a casual concert goer. But it is an important part of our identity sometimes, and music therapists can certainly help with that. So these goals will change depending on the stage of dementia, depending on what the challenges are. But again, the important thing is that it's specific to the person or the group of people. And usually when I'm talking about a group, let's say we're talking about a long-term care home, the nurses, the doctors, the other care staff will say, you know what, we have a bunch of men in this unit that are really not coming out and participating. They're experiencing a lot of depression. They really, don't want to get up and even go to their meals. Let's start a group for them. So they have common needs that the music therapist will focus on and help them with those challenges. So group goals are really important, that it's not just a group of people with various needs. We really want to focus in and help people that have similar needs. Okay. So these are the various places you might find a music therapist working. If we're talking about working with people who have dementia, that's a client of mine that during a group, this is a group of men who had sort of early to mid stages of dementia, and a big part of the group was to encourage any kind of spontaneous reaction to active music making. So I was always providing live music. It was very personalized to the people that were in the group. And this particular group member, without fail, when a certain song was played, wanted to get up and to move. And the other group members encouraged him. And it was sort of a big part of the culture of the group that we had. It was a very successful group, about 7 men, who supported each other, I would say, right up until each of them became too impaired to come to the group anymore. So it's a very special experience. You'll also find music therapists working with people in hospital settings. So often there are places at Baycrest, for example, complex continuing care in the hospital where people live a long amount of time, and music therapy can help them with the challenges that come from living in a hospital setting. Also in palliative care, which palliative care, of course, spans through the ages, but there are different challenges, I think, when we reach palliative care if we have aged without any challenges versus are dying with dementia or are dying with a disease that makes our brains not cooperative and can be a very confusing time. And a music therapist is often a great addition at that time to help them to feel more secure and to feel less afraid at that time, toward the end of their life. Day programs also. So music therapists will often provide services in day programs. Obviously, in a day program, there's a lot of participants. So sometimes it's sort of a community group that happens, and other times the staff at the day programs have targeted certain people to go off and have a group together. Okay. This is a photo of one of our music therapists at Baycrest working with a gentleman in another music therapy group. I'm going to take some time, and actually, Greg, how much time do I have left? I didn't bring my watch up here. I want to know how many stories I can tell you. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I will give you a few stories to sort of illustrate how I've worked with different people and what music therapy looks like at the different stages of living with dementia. These are just some examples, but hopefully they give you a little illustration of what this can be like. First, I'll talk about Susan. I worked with Susan at the Music Therapy Center, so that's the second hat I wear. I'm here representing Baycrest, but I also do work at the Music Therapy Center. Susan had the early stages of Alzheimer's, and she actually found us on her own and learned a little bit about music therapy and thought it might be useful for her. So she called and referred herself for music therapy and started coming to see me for one-on-one individual sessions. She was really aware of her diagnosis, obviously, and not coping well with the fact that this was going to be what the rest of her life looked like. She was very cognitively able to understand how the disease would progress and what that would mean for her. She had a lot of anxiety about not knowing how fast it would progress or what her family would do without her, what kind of care she wanted as the disease progressed. So on the one hand, she had the opportunity to have a say in what her wishes would be as the disease progressed. On the other hand, she lived a very long time in the early stages and had a lot of anxiety and worry about what kind of burden would ensue as it progressed. So we worked through a lot of grieving. She was grieving the life she had and also grieving what she knew would be losses that were coming. I should say her husband brought her for these sessions, and while she was in the session with me, he would go and let her have that time. It was really important for her to work through some of these things, knowing that she could share things that she felt would burden her husband to share with him. So it was very much a private session and very confidential as well. So we worked through a lot of things. We always had some form of expression. So she sort of listed out music that was important to her, and we would always sing. Susan couldn't sing at all, and it took a while for her to be comfortable using her voice. I kept saying to her, "We're not at Carnegie Hall, it's just you and me." And eventually she felt more comfortable with that. And the physical effects of singing are extremely beneficial if you're going through something like anxiety or something where you kind of feel the weight of the world on your shoulders. Listening to music is great. Singing music and making music has an even greater effect physically on how you're feeling. So we got to that point where she was really able to open up and express herself musically. We wrote songs together. Now, she was not, she had no formal music training, so obviously I facilitated the songwriting, but she ended up writing 5 or 6 songs, 2 of them that she kept private, that I kept and did not share with anyone after she wasn't able to come anymore. They're locked away in her file privately, and they were really about the struggle and about all of the difficulties she was facing, but not things that she wanted to share with people. The other 4 songs were written for the different people in her family that she wanted to leave a legacy for. She asked that after we recorded them, and she did participate in the making of the music. In one of the songs, she played a tambourine. In another song, she did sing parts of it. We wrote the music together, so I would play, what do you want it to sound like, and play something, and she'd say, no, that's too fast. It needs to sound like this. So we worked through some songwriting together and produced a CD together that she made the cover for with some meaningful pictures, wrote some messages inside the CDs. We put them in a box, gave them to her husband, and the instructions were, once I'm not able to remember anymore, once I don't know my children anymore, can you please give everybody these CDs? And the last thing that we did is she worked on creating playlists for herself. So a few years ago, the Alzheimer's Society started their Music and Memories program, and we started hearing about personalized music and personalized playlists. She found that really fascinating, and so together we made, I'm going to say, 8 different playlists that, through music therapy research, I helped her to place songs in different orders and with different tempos for different times of the day. So a playlist to help her to wake up and become energized in the morning, a playlist to help her sleep at night, a playlist for exercise, a playlist for relaxing. So we worked through that together as well. So that was Susan. Someone with sort of the mid-stages of dementia that I worked with in long-term care, his name was Albert. He was no longer able to recognize his family. He was usually quite happy, usually telling the same jokes and the same stories over and over and over again. He wandered pretty constantly and was a really restless guy. So he was referred to me, number one, to give him an outlet for telling those stories and hopefully to allow him to kind of go beyond that constant repetitive storytelling and express himself in different ways. So and it was a group that he was referred to. And the group was for people who were wanderers, people that couldn't sit down, couldn't stay still. Magically enough, when you're focused on music, it's a lot easier to focus and to sit still. So most of the patients that were part of that group were really able to focus. We worked up from sitting for 20 minutes, and then the next week we'd try for 30, and the next week we'd try for 45. And eventually, when it became a routine that felt familiar and felt good, we were able to have 1-hour sessions together. So that was a big goal for Albert, was to sit and to focus on something for an hour. We really facilitated a lot of connection and interaction. So we used a lot of handheld instruments, and part of the goals that we had for the people in the group were to share instruments. So after some directives, let's all play this with the drums, now pass the drum to your neighbor. Those sort of interactive things that don't come naturally once our minds start to become confused. We also really were trying to decrease his repetitive jokes. And then initially, he told the same joke throughout the entire group, and some of the other group members who were aware of the fact that they'd heard it 5 times would get really frustrated with him. But the more he came to the group, it was a weekly group, the more familiar he became with the routine. Even though he didn't remember what he did last week, that routine becomes familiar because it's consistent. And by the end of the time that we worked together, he would maybe come in and share a joke at the beginning, and then he was able to focus on what we were doing that day. Maybe as he left, he would say, I got another joke for you. But 2 jokes as opposed to 50 was a really good accomplishment. What else here? Oh, the other goal that we had was for him to have moments of accurate memory. And that one was really remarkable for Albert. There was one group session, we were all drumming, and for whatever reason, we talked about with the brain things lining up sometimes, whatever it was with the rhythms we were keeping and how we were drumming together, his son came through the doorway, and he turned and he said, David, come on in, pick up a drum. So in that moment, for whatever reason, if we had an MRI machine at the time, maybe we could have understood it more. All I know is that whatever was happening musically was working for him in that moment. Things in the memory centers of his brain went da, 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 and he looked up and said, I know that person. Now, there was no understanding around the fact that usually he doesn't recognize that person, but in that moment, for the 10 seconds that it took for his son to come and sit and to play the music with him, everything made sense. And those kinds of moments aren't usually goals that we have, because we can't expect those things to happen. But when they do happen, it can be something really special for the people that are there to witness it and there to feel it. And for that person, we really hope that's a moment where things make sense, where things feel not confusing, where things are meaningful to us. So that about 5 minutes at the end of the music therapy session where he and his son were really connected, that was an incredible 5 minutes for both of them. As they left, the son kept singing with him, and he reported to me that after their 1-hour visit, he was still saying his son's name and still sharing about the music that they were singing. So again, as the music kept going, we were able to have that successful connection, which was a big gift for both of them. And lastly, I'll talk to you about Barry. Barry had late-stage dementia. He lived on a different unit in the long-term care home. This was at Baycrest. He was in a wheelchair. He was completely dependent, so not eating on his own, not able to grasp things or manipulate things. So, people were caring for him in terms of all the activities of daily living. He usually had his eyes closed. Usually during care, so being showered or changed, he would get really aggressive. Which makes sense. If someone were to come and try to give you a bath and you didn't understand why they were doing it, you would probably act aggressively. So he was referred for a few reasons. They would have me come in the morning before they were getting him out of bed, so that I could perhaps get him into a place where they could get him out of bed without that aggression coming up. I also had sessions with him when his wife was there to try and facilitate some connection between the two of them, because otherwise she was really frustrated that he didn't open his eyes, he never looked at her, she wasn't getting any responses from him. So we did those one-on-one sessions in the morning before care, and we did the sessions with his wife once a week. We were trying to increase his alertness. So can we help him to open his eyes? Can we help him to connect on an alert level? We were trying to increase the interaction with his wife, and not just interaction, but meaningful interaction where she could feel that he was there with her. Also trying to get some moments where he would use his voice, whether that was just a sound or whether it was singing. That was something that we were hoping for. It was one of those goals where we weren't looking for it every week, but when it did happen, it was lovely. We also were trying to provide him with some sensory stimulation. So if you've ever been in a long-term care home, you know that a lot of the time people with late-stage dementia or people who require continuous care are often found sitting in their wheelchairs in a hallway or sitting in front of a TV and not really aware of what's going on around them. And this was really a way for us to provide him with stimulation that he wasn't getting at other times of the day. So the musical stimulation, I would play instruments and use his hands if you know what a kabasa is, it has a nice texture to it. So using tactile things to stimulate him, to use my voice. And all of those things together resulted in a few things. Number one, it was usually easier for the nurses to get him up in the morning and to get him changed. So even though he wasn't opening his eyes and participating with me, hearing the music is active participation. The brain is doing something. We don't know what, but we hope that it's having a pleasant experience, and we hope that it's providing a sense of calm or a sense of feeling familiar. So I would come in, I knew which kind of music he liked, which is a huge bonus. If I don't know what somebody likes, I usually improvise music, because the worst thing you can do is play something someone doesn't like, and then you're getting the opposite effect. But for him, I did know what music he liked, so I would spend about 10 minutes with him just playing music. In between the songs, I would improvise and sing, it's time to get up, it's time to get up, and kind of cueing musically that it was the morning and that the staff were coming to get him soon. The staff would come and they would sing with me, and we would try to keep the music going while they started to move his bed and get him sitting up and remove his clothing and do the things that they needed to do to start his day. So after, I'm going to say 5 or 6 sessions together, number one, the nurses kind of got it more and were a little more receptive to participating in it. And then I'm going to say maybe 2 or 3 sessions later, we had our first really successful time where he did not once lash out, he didn't call out. He wasn't opening his eyes or participating, but he was very calm and very cooperative. So that was a big success. And the other thing we were working on with his wife and interaction and some kind of level of alertness and level of expressing, that was really week by week variable. And like I said with the last example, when things did line up and really sort of visibly happen, those were gifts. On the times when that didn't happen, it was important for her to remember that the music was still stimulating his brain. The music was still being registered no matter what we were seeing from him. We can, through science now, understand that that was still something that was happening for him. When we did have success, I would play a song that he was familiar with. Usually guitar and voice was what I would use. And sometimes, if we were having a day where it was really connecting, he would start to move his head a little bit to the music. And after the song, I would say to him, Barry, you're hearing that music. And he would sometimes say, And the wife would say, there he is. We would continue and sing another song, and she would take his hands and start to move with him. And sometimes he would squeeze back. So those little things were what we were trying to achieve. Sometimes our sessions were about half an hour because it was apparent that he just wanted to sleep. Other times when he would sort of have those signals that he was more and more alert, we would keep going. And after an hour, sometimes he was vocalizing, never with words, but sometimes the melody. So if we were singing a song like "You Are My Sunshine," we wouldn't hear him sing the words, but we would hear him. Those were moments where the wife, would get out her tissues and sing along with him and say, there is my husband, that's him, I can hear him. So those are some examples of the work that we do with people who are living with dementia. I want to quickly talk about, you heard me talk about Susan and making personalized playlists. This really got big in the media, especially in Toronto with the Alzheimer's Society Toronto and the project where they were giving out iPods to families who had a person living with dementia. And at Baycrest, what I was finding was that families were accessing the service, but they didn't really know what to do with it. The Alzheimer's Society does a great job at providing the instructions for how to make the playlist, how to put it on the iPod, how to use the iPod and charge the iPod and care for it. But they really weren't giving any information around how do you make a good playlist, one that's going to be really effective for that person. When should you play it? How should you play it? How do you do it in a way that's going to really benefit them? And then what do you do if you are there and something really emotional happens, if the person starts to weep or if the person becomes aggressive? How do you respond to that? So this, the picture that is up here is a picture of a booklet that we developed. It's really aimed at, it's really for everyone. We have some seniors at Baycrest who use it for themselves, people who don't have cognitive impairment. Family members can find it very useful. Some of the nurses who help facilitate listening to the music find it really useful. So it's really meant for anyone that's interested in using music in that way. And our hope is that, some of the things that I was seeing were people left in the hallway with headphones on and they're kind of slouched over, and I'm thinking, okay, who put that on them? How long have they been sitting here? Are they even processing this music? It's not an effective way to use a tool like this. So we're hoping that this document will help people to better understand how they can use it in a way that's really effective. The problem with the example I gave of someone sitting by themselves with the headphones, that can be a barrier. That can be a boundary where the person doesn't hear what's going on around them. If their eyes are closed and they're listening to the music, we don't really know how they're processing it or what they're experiencing. So this gives some tools for how you can do that better, how it can be more effective, and really how it can be a more safe experience. Music, if we're saying that music is very powerful, which we know it is, then we also have to acknowledge that it can do damage as well. It can be something that, if we're not aware of it, could be doing something negative to the person. So we really want to be aware of those signals and be able to respond to them to make sure that we're giving the person what they need in that moment. The other thing I wrote up here, real expectations. I had a grandson call me at Baycrest and he said, I've got the iPod, I've got the iPod, I've got the playlist music, I know my grandmother loves this music, I'm putting the headphones on her, she's not waking up. And I thought, oh goodness, you poor thing, you're trying so hard. And he had seen the YouTube clip of Henry. Have you seen that with the gentleman in long-term care? And he's sitting in his wheelchair and he's kind of slumped over. And the recreation person comes in and puts headphones on him and plays a song that they know that he enjoys. And he sits up and his eyes open and he sings along to the music. And this was a really powerful clip. The movie itself was really powerful. But some people got some unrealistic expectations that this magical thing was going to happen. If they got the right music and they put the music on their loved one, that their loved one is going to sing and they're going to come alive. So this document also is hopefully going to help people understand that even if your grandmother is not coming alive, if you know that that's music that she loves, something in there is benefiting then, and on some level she's processing that music. And there are some instructions in the guidelines as well for different things you can try, because on one day there may be nothing, on other days you try it differently and something amazing might happen. So hopefully this will be a good resource. I do have a couple copies of it if anyone would really like one. I do have a couple. I think here at the bottom there is a website, and I'm going to, if anyone is wanting to write this down, I'm going to tell you right up front, it is really hard to find this on the Baycrest website. It is hidden under every single tab that you could ever come across. So maybe I won't say it right now, but if you're interested in finding this online, come and talk to me afterwards, and I'll tell you exactly where you can find it on the website, or my email's at the end of the presentation. You can take down my email, and I'd be happy to send you a copy of it. It is on the website, but it's extremely difficult to find it. Okay, so we're going to talk about caregivers, because when you're looking after someone who has a cognitive impairment or physical impairment or any kind of challenge, it's often the caregivers that don't get support, and often they're the ones who need it the most. In order to take care of others, you have to take care of yourself. That's something that I've said to many of my family members. You're doing a great job, but what kind of care are you getting? Music therapy might help caregivers to explore challenges and emotions that are related to caring for someone. I've worked with some support groups. Support groups are a wonderful way for people to share what's happening and what they're going through, to share ideas, to share advice with each other, but also to really work through that it's difficult. And music therapy can be a means to work through those things, whether it's in a group setting with other people in similar situations, or it might be something you really want to work on one-on-one and have that private therapeutic time. Music therapy can help to achieve some balance, decrease burnout. Burnout is a really difficult thing for people who are caring for others. It can just be a way to promote wellness. And I'm talking about physical wellness, feeling good in the morning, but also emotional wellness. So, even though your body might be going strong and you feel like, yeah, I can go and make breakfast and get him dressed and get him out the door to the day program, then I'm going to go do this, and go pick him up again, and we're going to come home. I'm going to turn on the monitor so that he doesn't get up and wander off the property. All of that stuff, over and over and over again, you are going to experience burnout if you're not taking care of yourself. And you are going to be emotionally very, very taxed. And music therapy can be sort of an accessible way to go through some of that stuff. And the last one I listed here is to increase connection with a loved one. So we have had clients at the Music Therapy Center that come with their loved one. So someone who has an impairment with their spouse, and it's a way for them to do therapeutic things together and to leave feeling more connected and to leave feeling a little less stressed out, a little more physically able, a little more emotionally ready for the rest of the day. So I really, if you are caring for someone in your life, I would encourage you, if you're looking for support, to consider something like music therapy as something that might be really helpful for you. So normal aging, normal in quotation marks. There really is no normal aging, but the people that I've lived with who have been fortunate enough to age without having any kind of official diagnosis of some sort still have challenges. My dad is nearing 70, and he constantly says to me, aging is not for sissies. You have to be tough to age. And I think, based on what I see in the work that I do, you're right. No matter what you're going through, aging can be really difficult. There are challenges at every stage of life. Aging is no different. And even those who are healthy are going to need some support in their life if they choose to seek it out, if they choose to increase their wellness and increase their positive experiences. we can preserve what's working well. So now, we're learning more and more that leading up to older ages, there are things that we can do to help preserve what we have, to sort of guard against things that might come up. Music therapy is a tool that can help with that as well, especially when we're thinking about things like memory or cognition. There's lots of research now that says learning an instrument or participating in a choir, those things that exercise the musical brains that we have, maybe that can help to slow down a disease progression. Maybe that can even stop the progression of the disease. We don't know that exactly yet, but that's what we're hoping to find out as we do more and more research. But certainly we know that it can be something to increase your wellness and hopefully preserve what's working well for you, and prevent future challenges. I know there's a choir that I lead at Baycrest in the day program. Some of the people there have mild cognitive impairment. Some of them have physical needs that make it hard to get through daily life, and the day program's a place they come together, to do things that make them feel well, and also to give their spouse some respite to go and do all the errands that need to get, it's not really giving the spouse a break. I don't like it when people say that. They're not getting a break. They're going off and doing a million things before they come back to pick up their loved one and get on with their day. But certainly the choir that we do, one of the goals is to be well, to sing together, to make music together, hopefully to preserve some of the memories, hopefully to allow them to take a deeper breath if they're having trouble with breathing, or to move their arms and to move their bodies if their body is giving them difficulty with physical movement. So participating in music therapy, hopefully we can help that there won't be future challenges with your cognition, or maybe it will help you preserve memories longer than you would have if you didn't seek something like this kind of intervention. Okay, what am I forgetting? Here we go. What can you do all by yourself without seeking music therapy or working with a therapist of any kind? Music is pretty accessible for us, especially now. Greg and I were talking about technology and the challenges it creates and also the accessibility that it creates. So make music. Even if you're not feeling like you're someone who could sing in a choir, make music, sing in the shower. When you're on the TTC, sing and see what people think. Maybe that's not a good example, but find places where you can be musically active. If you're not comfortable doing that with others, find private time to make music, whether it's to bang along, on a drum or on some pots and pans while you're listening to your favorite music, whether it's singing in the shower, singing in the car, singing along when you have some private time. The singing part and the making music, the beating out the rhythm or dancing to the rhythm, that's the more that you're doing, the more parts of your brain are benefiting and being exercised. Just like physical exercise, that brain exercise is going to do good things for you. So make music. Listen to music consciously, and consciously is the important part. Just putting on the radio and then mindlessly doing the dishes, you're not really exercising there. You're just it's like standing on the treadmill without walking. You've got the tool there, but you're not really using the tool. So actually sitting down, putting on music intentionally, whether it's classical music that you've been meaning to listen to, or your favorite Justin Bieber CD, choose something for the moment that you really want to listen to, put the music on, and sit down and listen to it. Don't do anything else, but listen to the music and see what you notice about the music. Where do you feel the music in your body? How do you experience that music? That's how you're going to listen consciously. That's how your brain is going to get the most out of the music that you're listening to. Learn an instrument. And I would say 90% of the people that I have talked to who are 65 years and older, let's say, learn an instrument. Why would I do that? I've never played an instrument. It's too late to learn an instrument. Why would I want to do that? Well, it's not too late. I've had a few clients who have come to the Music Therapy Center saying, I really would love to play the guitar, but I don't want to have to go through all those lessons, and I just want to make it sound good. How can I do that? And I've worked with many people where I've said, you don't need to know what all these strings need. Give me some stickers. I'll show you where to put your fingers. That's going to make a beautiful chord, and then I'll show you how to make the next chord, and you can go back and forth between those two chords and sing probably most of the popular music from the 1940s. So there are ways to learn musical instruments without having to take Royal Conservatory music lessons and practicing scales and learning all of the technique. that's not the only way to learn music. So, and there are places out there in Toronto that will teach music in sort of non-conventional ways. So if you are interested in learning an instrument, I would encourage you to talk to the music schools and say, I really want to learn how to play the banjo, but I'm not interested in learning the technique. I just want to know how to make it sound good. Can you help me to do that? Hopefully they say yes, or if they say no, ask them for a recommendation. Do you know of anybody who would help me with that? Yes. The beat goes on. Very neat, yes. So there are different, there's also choir. Some of you may have heard of that. So there are different groups in Toronto. We're kind of lucky in this big city. There's lots of opportunities where you can be completely, if you want to call yourself this, you can be completely non-musical and go and participate, and nobody's going to fault you for that. So find a way to learn a new instrument. Singing is a new instrument. If you have never been a singer before, learning how to use your voice. Some people think, I don't need a teacher for that. You'd be surprised at what going and working with a music therapist or working with a music teacher can do to help you to use your voice in a way that's going to be much more therapeutic than doing it on your own. So there are some things you could do on your own. When might you want to seek a music therapist? So, you've been doing the music thing, or maybe you're not sure about the music thing on your own. It might be worth seeking a music therapist if you're trying to work through something difficult. It's kind of the difference between talking to your friend and talking to a talk therapist, or exercising at the gym versus working with a personal trainer or working with a physiotherapist. If there's something that you're really wanting to work through, it's worth it to seek a music therapist and see if they can help you. They have the training to help you explore things, to resolve some personal issues, maybe even things you didn't know that you were struggling with. If it's things around end of life, helping you to create a legacy through music. It's a wonderful way to work through those kinds of challenges. Also to help you and support you to focus on wellness. I know for me, exercising doesn't happen unless I have support. The music part, that's easy for me. I can do that by myself. Although I have worked with music therapists, we help each other out as well. So, know when you need support and you need help to work on being more well. If it's something you're not motivated to do, then you definitely should seek out a music therapist, have some sessions, see what that does for you. Maybe you only need 2 sessions to get you going and help you create a wellness plan. Or maybe seeing someone once a week becomes part of your weekly routine that you really benefit from. So no matter what stage of life you're at, whether you have a challenge or an impairment, or whether you're a healthy person, no matter what you're going through, consider music therapy as something that is an option. It's something that is a tool that you can use. If you have loved ones who are going through challenges, certainly help them to explore it as well. It could be useful for someone that you know. And I hope that, in the future, when you're looking at resources for yourself, certainly come back to this and consider that this might be an option. So I think at that point, I'm going to open it up for some questions. Greg has a microphone, so maybe if you have a question, you could put your hand up and he can come and find you. I'm also going to put some handouts just at the front of the stage, so if you do have to get up and leave and you'd like one, just come up and get one.
Hi, thank you very much. The presentation was very informative and enlightening. Can I ask you about the service that you provide? If I were to call you as a therapist, where are you located? And do you determine with each person how many sessions they need, or is there a standard group program where you're there several times? Thank you.
So it really varies. So again, I have 2 jobs. I work at Baycrest. Now, to access music therapy at Baycrest, you have to be a patient or a resident. So if that's not the case, then my other job at the Music Therapy Center is really open for anybody who's interested in music therapy. And you work with your therapist to determine what you need, how much of it you need, how regularly you need it. It's really individualized for each person or each group.
Yeah. Hi. I'm wondering, I used to hear that music like the music of Bach was scientifically proven to be actually beneficial, healing perhaps even. Is there been more research done on Bach or other kinds of musics that supports that?
Great question. Immediately when you said that, I thought about the Mozart effect, which was really big 12 or 13 years ago. They had the CDs for children to help them learn better. It was called the Mozart effect. And I think I think what it's important to understand two things. Number one, they're doing research on lots of different kinds of music, and no matter what kind of music it is, it depends on how you enjoy the music. So the pleasure part of it, the part of your brain that says, I like this, I want more of it, is more important than the actual music. So if you're listening to Bach and you're going, oh my gosh, when is this CD going to be over, or when can I leave this concert, it's probably not going to be super useful for you. If you love Bach, then absolutely. I think the benefits of, Western classical music is special because it has so many layers. There's so many different instruments being played. When you look at the score that the composer writes, it's like, miles long with all the different, textures and instruments that you're hearing. That does make classical music special. It does offer sort of a special way that is different from listening to popular music you hear on the radio, where it's really about the bass beat and the melody. You've got those 2 layers versus, possibly 50 layers. So certainly I think there is a lot of research looking at the complexity of classical music and how that impacts the brain and how it benefits the brain. But most importantly, if you're listening to it and you don't like it, it's probably not going to be a big benefit for you. Yeah, thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
How do you work with somebody who is resistant to music? So, for example, if you turn on the music station, just on the radio, and he will turn it off.
Aha. So the question is working with someone who usually will turn off music. So, first, the easy answer is if someone really isn't enjoying it, then music therapy maybe isn't for them. I've never had that happen. But I think it could happen, if someone really is not a person who, is open to interacting with music or listening to music, that would be a challenge. However, when I go and meet new clients, I usually go without music. I don't turn on the radio, I don't put music on a CD player, I don't bring my guitar, I don't play the piano. I go and I talk to them first. Even if there's someone with an impairment, I'll go and I'll talk to them first and try to get to know them a little bit and see how comfortable they are with me. And if I can get a little bit of trust from that person before I suggest music, that sometimes opens the door. I have found with people who have impairments, that instinct to turn the music off is sometimes impaired as well. So it can sometimes open the door a little bit easier if the impairment sort of helps me to get through that door. But certainly there are people who music therapy is maybe not for them. And if they're resistant to it, they're not going to benefit from it. So I might try meeting with them a few times to see if they'll become comfortable with me and trust me to try a few things. And after I've done that, then you want to respect their wishes and say, okay, this isn't for you maybe. You're welcome.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
Excuse me, my voice is a little... But here we go. My question is for you. Looking at the slide in front of us, there's a conductor.
That's me up there.
Right, well done. Now, I'm a little intrigued as to, my question actually goes with the, obviously, learning to play an instrument. Where basically locally, could you learn to be a conductor?
Interesting question. So the picture that you're seeing up there with my hands waving in the air, that's the choir I was talking about earlier at Baycrest. It's a community music therapy group. The goals are very broad. We're not as interested in tracking things as we are the experience. And something the group decided to take on together was to create a CD. So what you're seeing is us creating, or recording rather, a CD that was produced. And conducting in and of itself, I've often had clients who I put a conductor's baton in their hand, and even if they've never held one, that instinct to move your hand with the baton is incredible. No matter what culture you come from, no matter how young or old you are, for some reason, if music is happening and a baton is placed in your hand, it's kind of an instinct, I have no idea why, to move the baton or to move your hand. Now, if you're asking me where can you go to learn how to conduct, I would say you'd have to find a special music school that would be open to doing that with you. And truthfully, I have no idea offhand. I've never had someone ask that before. But I think there's a few schools. One that comes to mind is called the Toronto Institute for the Enjoyment of Music. It's a big title. It's on Queen West. And they're one of those schools that's really open to teaching in non-conventional ways. And they might find your request intriguing. And most music teachers would have had, even in my music therapy degree, I had to take a conducting course. So if you've done a degree in music, then you've had at least a beginner's introduction to conducting. So there may be music teachers out there that would say, yeah, awesome, I would love to teach you to conduct. Alternatively, if you're looking at working on some stuff through the conducting, a music therapist could definitely work with you.
Getting back to the gentleman's question about the music of Bach, I read an interesting article in Epoch newspaper. You may have heard of that. It's all over. It's a free thing. It's Chinese or Chinese English or Canadian Chinese, American Chinese. But there was a very interesting article by a neurologist who was an opera singer. Have you heard of her? She did research and came to the conclusion. All research, I suppose, is like tentative conclusions, but nonetheless, that Baroque music was the most desirable for people with Alzheimer's because it did not have that much emotional content compared to, let's say, Beethoven or Strauss or what have you. I thought that was very interesting, and I wonder if you know anything more about that.
I have never even heard of this person, but now I'm going to look her up because that is really fascinating. You know what? I would have to say that there's so much research happening on different composers, and the theme is that they find out the music does good things. And so no matter which composer I'm reading about or which performer is performing the music, I think the general theme is that I've never heard one researcher say that music doesn't do interesting things to the brain. So I think no matter what you're looking at, I think she's probably right. She probably looked at how people with dementia respond to the music. They probably responded positively to the music. And her theory is that it's because the music is like this. My personal opinion is that she would probably find that with other composers too, but maybe more or less depending on the personal preferences of the subjects that she's studying. So it's a good point for when you're looking at your own music. Listen to Bach. How do you feel about it when you listen to it? How does it impact you as a person? And if you're thinking about putting together some personal playlists as you get older and you want to make sure you've got the right music, maybe you add Bach to the list because that research resonates with you and you listen to the music and you think, what she said makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I'm not speaking from my own research, but from my personal experiences, there's lots and lots of studies that say, Beethoven is good, Bach is good, Mozart does this. And I think all of it is true. And I think probably you could lump it into a great big pot that says, wow, music does incredible things to the brain. And then I would pull over the other pot that says, you got to like the music. If it's something that isn't pleasing or doesn't turn on the pleasure center in the brain, then all of the results she would have gone bleh. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much for a very informative and useful presentation on the obviously rapidly evolving state of knowledge and practice in terms of musical therapy, at least for us, those of us who are in our final quarter, shall we say. I'm expecting, next time I walk by the Royal Conservatory, I'll see they're promoting the advantages of musical in the later stages of life. They haven't yet got to that point, but I expect any day now. So I have two questions, one specific and one general. One, is there any evidence in recent research that for people with mild cognitive disorder, musical therapy will create new memories, or in other words, help in the rewiring?
Right, that's a great question. I don't know if everybody heard that can we create new memories for people who have mild cognitive impairment? I will speak from a couple of research articles that say maybe, and then I'll speak from my personal experience. And there are a couple of community groups that I work with where it's the same people that come every week. When you have that consistency, when you're working with people at the same time week after week, even if they have that impairment, it becomes familiar. So they may not remember my name, but they remember that they recognize me and that they're there for music, and this is the routine. What I find incredible is that if we've been perhaps using a song that one person has never sung before or doesn't know, but it's someone else's favorite, after repeating that song week after week, suddenly the people who didn't know that song can sing it without me prompting them with the words or without me starting the song. To give you an example, there was a guy in the group, I don't remember his name, but he came in and he hated the song Mac the Knife. I don't know why he hated it, but another group member, it was their favorite song. So of course, as a music therapist, I'm saying, okay, so let's figure out a way that we can work with this. This guy loves it, this guy hates it. We're going to include it, but we're going to recognize that you don't like it, and that's okay. And after about, 5 or 6 weeks, the gentleman who hated it and didn't know any of the words because he never listened to it, didn't really familiarize himself with it, came in and he saw the other guy and he said, he remembered his name. I don't remember it right now, but let's say it's Joe. And he said, "Hey, Joe, when the clock strikes 6:30, babe," and started singing. And then it petered off and he lost track of it. But I think absolutely with consistency, it has to be consistent, and with a familiar pattern, I think, I would say from experience, absolutely we form new memories. Whether that transfers into other contexts or not, I don't know. So whether he would have remembered those lyrics outside of the context of the group that we were in, I have no idea. But certainly in that moment, nothing triggered that memory except his own doing. So I think there's more research being done, but absolutely I think new musical, especially musical memories can be formed.
And the second part is, in the wider view, from an evolutionary standpoint, man being somewhat unique in our musical abilities and interests and delights, does this confer some particular advantage, or is it just an adjunct of our large cortex, in which case the birds, of course, do it well with a very small brain?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to remember it must have been a neuro researcher who actually looked at birdsong and how we hear birdsong and how it's different in the bird's brain than it is in our brain. I think the big difference between now and then is we know more about it. I think with children, for example, who nobody's taught them anything yet, they are just sort of instinctively musical. And now what we know about how our brains work and our bodies work, we know that everybody's musical, whether they like the sound of their voice or not. We are musical beings. So I think, historically, there weren't those inhibitions, there weren't those rules around, what it should sound like or what the experience should be. And it's really fascinating how, over time, things shift with humans, but they're the same with the birds, they're the same with the animals, and that's been going on for as long as the bird has been going on. So humans are kind of unique in that way, where over the decades, over the years, sort of the rules shift and the social norms shift, and what's good and what's not good shifts. The birds always sound the way the birds should sound, for sure. Thank you. The general ability to... Yeah, we'd have to debate that. I don't have an answer for the question, but I think, it's definitely something interesting to consider, for sure.